Hello there, my name is Tony Harmer. I am the Chief Enchantments Officer at Wizardry Limited. I'm a lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning author, and I'm affectionately known as the Design Ninja. You can check out my courses and also my tutorials at youtube.com/thedesignninja. Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to do some Photoshop for landscape photographers. And that will of course include Camera Raw and a little bit of Adobe Bridge where we are right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this range of bracketed exposures just here, and I'm going to right click them and choose to open them in Camera Raw. So they'll open up like so, they get handed over to Photoshop and opened up here in the Camera Raw interpreter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the basic tab here for adjustments. Now we're going to visit this a few times throughout this session, and I'm going to process just a few images for you to look at. Okay, so what I want you to notice here, because I'm not going to adjust a single one of these exposures, is that I can take the exposure right the way down and right the way up by 5 stops in either direction. Now, you probably know that already, but the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to notice what happens next. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Shift here to select the entire range of exposures. I perhaps got a couple too many for what I'm doing here, given the difference in their stop value, but I'm sure they'll work fine anyway. So I'm going to right click here and choose Merge to HDR, and they'll open here in the HDR Merge preview. And all it's doing here is showing us what it's done in terms of aligning the images. It then crops away anything that doesn't align with it, and that it's applied the auto settings, taking a little bit from each file. This deghosting thing here is an algorithm that will detect the differences between those exposures in terms of their content. So typically if you've got a tree blowing around there or someone walking momentarily into the shot, it will look at those and ghost them out. Sometimes as well in landscapes, when you get wires from pylons and telegraph poles, there they move of course, and it will work out the best position for those and remove the other parts. Now if there was one, it would actually show in an overlay, but we will see that in just a little while anyway. So I'm going to hit Merge, and at this point it creates me a DNG file. I'm just going to drop this out onto my desktop here. And once it's done that, it opens up the HDR inside of Camera Raw. If I just go to the exposure just for a moment, so you can see what's actually happening here, right? I'm going to move this all the way to the left, and you can see that I can actually go as far as 10 in either direction. And that's because it's using the information from the files on the left hand side. It's just showing me where the component parts come from. So here now I can start to adjust this. So I'm just going to drop the exposure just a bit just here, make it slightly more contrasty. Okay, I might just up the exposure just a shade. I clicked that accidentally as I went through. And all of the other values have been set by the compiler, the thing that brought the thing together, the HDR compiler, just here. And of course I can override that. I could deepen the blacks, for example, to make that nice and dark just there. Going to add a tiny bit of texture just here, which will enrich that, and a bit of clarity, okay, to just bring out some more in the clouds, and a bit of dehaze. Not too much though. What I tend to do with these is I tend to go until I know it's too much, pretty much like that, and then I divide that in 2 and think, okay, that's 11, so around about 5, and I look at it from there and think that's still too much, so I take it down to like 2 or 3 until I get where I want to be, and I think that's fine the way it is. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that tab for now, and I'm going to bypass the curve tab just here and also the detail tab. I'm not going to do any sharpening here at the moment. I'm going to go to the color mixer and into the luminance area here. So we've got the H for hue, S for saturation, L for luminance. And I'm going to push the blues here down to darken them a bit. I'm going to go quite a way there. It's actually a handy tip that for when you're doing skies inside of an image, maybe with lots of light inside of it, and you want to bring a bit out of the skies, you can sometimes do that by changing the luminance. I'm also going to make the yellows a bit deeper and the oranges definitely, and the reds here. Okay, like so, really get that sky super, super hot just there. And then I'll come down to optics. I'm just going to enable remove chromatic aberration and use profile corrections just here, and you'll see that just pops in just a second there. I'll then go to geometry, the next tab, and I'm just going to click this option here to apply a level just to it, and I think that moved just a smidgen there. Okay, so that's fine. Let's do a bit of healing now in this region just here. So I'm going to get my healing tool from the right hand side here and go for this puddle, because that's somewhat distracting just there. So I'm going to remove that like so by brushing over it, and then if I just come out a bit, I can determine where the information is coming from to replace that. I think that's pretty good actually just there. Okay, so now I've got that, I'll go back to my general settings here and fit the image. So Command 0, Control 0 to do that. Next thing I'm going to do after the healing is I'm going to add a couple of graduated filters. In fact, I think I'll do one, then come away, then another one. So here I'm just going to click and drag down like so. I'm going to go kind of meet the angle of that sky just a little bit. Now in these adjustments, everything before the green is applied fully. There's nothing applied after the red, and this is the transition distance between the two. If I do something dramatic here, like take the exposure right the way down, okay, you'll be able to see how that works by changing that like so. Okay, so of course I'm not going to deepen the exposure quite that much just there, so I'm going to come away from that and just add just a little bit just here. I might also change the color temperature slightly, cool that down just a little bit. I think that's good. If I steer just a bit towards the magenta there, yeah, I think that works just a tiny bit. I think I might bring that down. Here I'm just using my arrow keys to bring that down to about halfway from where I was. I think that's pretty good. Might make that just a tad more contrasty and put a bit of dehaze in there. No, do you know what? That's not helping at all, so I'll double click on that. Maybe just a tiny bit more clarity. So that's building on top of the clarity that I had earlier. Everything else there I think is pretty okay for the moment. And then go to add a radial adjustment. Okay, just down here. So I'm going towards the middle of the image, clicking and dragging like so. I'm actually going to exceed the boundaries of the image here and then drag this down into place where I want it. Now, so we can see where it is, I'll bring down the exposure. There you go. And also to make sure that it's applying in the right place. Okay, if it wasn't, I could invert it to go outside like so. Wow. Then I'll go back to there. Now, what I'm going to do here is lift the exposure. So we've got some foreground interest, of course, just here, because we like that, don't we? And I'm going to dip the temperature down just a bit in that area, I think. Like I said to you earlier, it's easy to come back and change your mind, as you'll see shortly. Okay, then I'm going to add a bit of a color overlay here. So I've come down to this area here. I'm still favoring cooling that off quite a lot. So I'm going towards this sort of blue region here, but then dipping the saturation right down. That's pretty good there. I think just for the moment, that's excellent. Then I'll add another gradated adjustment here, just from the bottom. Okay, because unlike in Photoshop in the main, these are calculated differently the way they overlay each other. So I'm going to drop this down just a bit here. In fact, lift the exposure. Can you look at the corners there? Because the radial adjustment is affecting part of that. So it's lifting those out. I could then get a brush here because I don't want it on the sides. I'll use my bracket keys to bring that down and hold down shift and just tap a bit more. I'm using the left bracket there just to make that brush a bit harder. And in fact, if we needed to, we can actually see the mask just there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just brush. Oops, I need to set this to the eraser there, just at the top, and now erase just in that region there. Okay, so it's having no effect just there. Obviously I'm doing this very, very quickly. We don't have all day after all, and that will be just about fine there. So we can come and add that back if we need to. There is a brush at the top here, and of course the gradient itself. I'll turn off the overlay, so now we've got it just in that area. Now at this point, if I go back to the main event here, so to the settings at the top, and tap P on my keyboard, you can see how it was when we started off. Okay, and P again to what we've bought from it. Now, it's not 100% the way I want it just at the moment, but however, for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is go down to open just here, click on the small arrow and choose to open that as an object. And that will then hand over to Photoshop. So if I move to Photoshop now, it will be appearing there in just a moment. Just takes it a minute. There we go. And now Photoshop's got the file. So I, of course, could get into here and do a few different things with that in Photoshop. For example, I might want to do a little bit more of a more sensitive cloning operation just here to get rid of that cloud that doesn't look very, it is real. It doesn't look particularly real. So that's one of the things I might want to do there. The advantage here, of course, is I'm doing all of these things inside of a single layer. And if I do want to make a change, all I need to do is double click on that layer. It hands me back to Camera Raw. Now I'm just seeing the whole DNG there, although all of the information is in there. Okay, and let's just say I did want to do that healing just here. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's brush just around there, like so. And then we'll take that information from here. Let's see. That works pretty well, I think, you know. It's not too bad. I will go back now to Photoshop. And I actually am going to add another layer just here. Okay, I'm making sure when I tap S for the clone stamp tool that I have my settings here to current and below. I can then option click maybe somewhere like there. And now if I come along and brush in this region just here, I can much more sensitively model that. So I've got a nice soft brush there. Generally, I'd work at about 30% opacity on this and build it in really, really gently, so it becomes much more difficult to see the effect of the edit. And like I said, everything there is flexible. If I wanted to go back and change this gradient, I can just drop back in. Okay, I can go to the gradient tool here. I can see my two adjustments. So if I wanted to change where this one was, like so, I could do that, bring that down. If I wanted to go to the top one and change any of the settings, so let's actually make that a lot darker on the top there, like so, much more dramatic. I can go to my radial adjustment, same deal, click the point, it reactivates that. Okay, and then you can go ahead and do that. I could also add, if I wanted to, a second radial adjustment, maybe darken on the outside here as well, which would be interesting, or even get an adjustment brush and brush into these places like so. So I could, for example, just brush in this region here. Let me drop the exposure down so you can see where it's actually happening. All right, I'm going like crazy with it. I'll then switch to erase mode here and rub away the parts I don't want, just the bits that are hitting the sky basically. Again, not being very careful because we don't have all day. Now I can kind of tease that out a bit to get that to where I want it to be. And you can see it calculates very differently okay, than it does inside of Photoshop. If I go back to the brush, okay, I can carry on adding just there as well. So to paint that in, like on these edges where it's not really apparent there, and back out. And you can do that kind of ad infinitum, really, until you get the result you want. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to close this one just here and just save that out onto my desktop just for the moment. So that's a PSD with the DNG inside of it. Okay, of course I've got the DNG separately as well. And then we'll go back to Bridge. Okay, and we'll choose another image. Or in fact, we're going to choose a whole set. I'm actually going to grab all of the images along the top here. Okay, these are a very, very short panorama, but I'll right click, open those in Camera Raw. Okay, then I'll select all of those files like so. Right click and choose Merge to HDR Panorama. Okay, and what this will attempt to do is it will attempt to compile all of the individual sets of exposures and then blend them together and then stitch them into a panorama. It's crazy, crazy information that it has. Huge amounts of information just here. Generally as well, if I was setting this up in the first place, at the moment my workflow on this machine, which is the machine I record on, is set to 8-bit here. Normally I do all of this at 16. All right, but you can see the resulting image that I've got just here stitched from those 3 different things. You can see some of them on the side just there. Now I'm going to change the method to cylindrical just for the moment. Now the hazard again means that it's building the preview. There it goes, and this bit here will disappear in a minute when it finishes compiling it. Okay, so it's building that out. That's not too bad. Let's try perspective. I'm after it doing something particular just here, and it's, of course, it's not going to play with me. So what I'm going to do is change this boundary warp. This is where you can actually bend the edges yourself. So you can bend this around. Okay, so let's try that with cylindrical again. Okay, it's actually auto cropping. Let me stop that. There you go. So there's the auto crop going on just there. This is the thing I was after. And if you want to, you can always try, let me just bring that down to something more sensible just there. You can always try this handy fill edges algorithm, which uses content aware, okay, in Camera Raw. So if I do that, okay, you'll notice that it analyzes the image again, okay, and then uses content aware fill. That's not actually too bad. It's just waiting for this bit to build in the preview. So when, as soon as this goes, you'll see what it's like. So there you go. It's another handy tool to have in your toolkit. Now I'm not going to process that one because we don't have too much longer here. So I'm going to try and get this one done. I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to use a couple of images from my phone. Okay, first of all, I think I'll actually use this one just here, just shot really just around the back of my house. We live next to a river, or not far away from a river at any rate. And I'll choose opening Camera Raw just here, okay, and do a few things to it. So I'm just going to basically change the exposure just a bit here, drop that down. I'm not going to do too much just here because I want to do some stuff in Photoshop just in case you don't want to do too much with Camera Raw itself, right? Although I'm going to be coming back to it, but in a different way in a moment. So I'll just do some basic things just there. Let's make that a bit colder. Okay, that's just fine. I'm not going to use positive dehaze. I'm going to use a bit of negative dehaze just here. And that, for the purposes of this demonstration, is going to work just fine. So again, I'm opening this as an object. It hands over to Photoshop like so. I don't know who changed my my workspace most recently, but I need to not do that. Okay, there we are. So here's the image in Photoshop. What I'm going to show you now is how you can make some luminosity masks that you can use in your work, and also how you can use Camera Raw while you're in Photoshop on part of an image, part of a layer. So let's do the luminosity mask thing first. Now there are a few different ways of doing this, but I'm going to give you a really handy trick. And that trick is to go to the select menu and come down to color range. Okay, and from here in the menu at the top, we've got these three ranges here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the highlights, and you can see with the mask, if I just swap this out to image and actually drop this onto the layer as a black matte, you can see what it's getting in terms of the highlight. Remember, black is concealing and white is revealing, so you can see that through there. Let me just change this back here so you can see it that way. There you go. There's the mask. Okay, so it's working nicely on there, and I can tune it if I want to. Okay, so I can actually push a few more things, okay, to and from that. In fact, if you do this sensitively, you can actually build out a whole set of luminosity masks. So I'm just going to do 3 for now. When I hit OK, that comes in as a selection. And what I can then do in the channels panel, come down to this icon just here to save the selection as a channel. Hold down Option and click on that, because that way you can name it at the same time. Okay, and we'll call this highlights, like so. Okay, and then we can deselect that, Command D to get rid of that. Let's go back to the RGB, Command 2 or Control 2 to do that. You'll see that they're all numbered here from 2 through to 5, the RGB channels, and then our additional channels like Command 6 for that one. So we'll go ahead, do that again, select, color range. I'll choose this time the midtones, hit OK, hold down Option or Alt and click on Save Selection as Image. Okay, we'll call this midtones, just there like so. Deselect that, Command 2 or Control 2 to go back to RGB. Okay, because if you don't, otherwise it's trying to select on those masks, and this might not be available anyway. So color range, we'll go in here for shadows. Okay, perfect, that's grand. Okay, and you already know what I'm going to do at this particular point. Okay, so there we are. Shadows, brilliant. Okay, so I've got highlights on Command 6 or Control 6, midtones on Command 7, Control 7, shadows on Command 8 or Control 8. Pretty easy to remember. And like I said, you can add even more, even finer ranges in if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to deselect that. Then I'm going to go across to my layers here. This is a smart object, right, which is great because I can do stuff to it, okay, and won't damage the original information. So I think what I'm going to do is use a bit of Camera Raw, but inside of the image. Okay, so I'm going to go to the filter menu here and choose Camera Raw filter, which you can use on an image or a portion of an image. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the exposure dramatically. Just here, right, I'm going to lift that right the way up. Now you can see that the sky just there is suffering as a result of that. Of course, it's all being bleached out. That's just fine, and that's all I'm going to do just for the moment here. But in this mask, I can load one of my selections. So I think I'll load the highlights here. Okay, if you remember, that was Command 6 for me. You'll notice this has changed. Okay, you can see the channel. Actually, let me do Command 2 again because I missed a key out. So Option Command or Alt Control 6, that loads the channel rather than displaying it. Okay, then I can go to my mask here and fill that with black. Alt Backspace, and you can see now the effect of that adjustment is not making it through to the sky. So that's a handy thing to know. And of course, if I had time, we'd go ahead and we'd do a lot more with this image. I actually have done a couple of edits of this where it turns out really, really nice. But just for now, we'll skip on. So I'll go back to Bridge, and here I've got another photo. I think this was from my phone as well, actually, but we'll right click here. Okay, and we'll open that in Photoshop. I think we'll just go ahead and open. Actually, no, we will do Camera Raw, because I've just thought of something else we could do that would be pretty cool just here, and that is, okay, to add a bit of negative dehaze. All right, actually, no, we'll go positive first. Then I'm going to add a gradated adjustment. I hope you're keeping up. At least with the video, you can watch it again, right? So, and here, inside of this gradated adjustment, I'm going to add some negative dehaze. Right, so I'm going to increase the amount of mist there. If I flick it backwards and forwards, you can see exactly what's happening. Now, of course, that's affecting the trees. Okay, so something else I can do that is really cool here in this gradated adjustment or a radial adjustment is actually use a range mask. Now, if I go here to luminance, okay, and I'm going to visualize the luminance map with this red overlay. Here I've got two sliders for dark and light. Watch what happens if I can zoom in. Let me just try to zoom in just here for you. If I push this end, can you see that? The trees are starting to be removed from that mask, right? I'm going just a shade too far just there, but on purpose. Okay, now if I turn off the visualize, you can see I've still got that lovely soft background going on just there. Okay, but it's no longer affecting the trees because it's like a luminosity mask at that level. It's a really, really cool thing. You can also adjust the smoothness if you want to, and so much more. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is if I go ahead and open this as an object, is that this actually has a few problems in it if I wanted to get rid of these sticks. And there's a really quite old but much overlooked feature inside of Photoshop that can help you with exactly this sort of thing. And it's called vanishing point. Now, first of all, I'm going to add a brand new layer here across the top. So you could click the new layer icon. I used a shortcut to do mine. Okay. I'm then going to go up to the filter menu and down to vanishing point. And this will open like so. And it starts off with this, the plane tool just here. Okay. And I'm going to go away up the path just here. Now, this is not going to be super easy to see, I know, because you're probably seeing it on a small screen just here. But let's just go ahead and do that. Now that's perfect because I've got grid lines, but sometimes you will see it appear, maybe it's not going to do it now, is it? There you go. Like a red line around the outside. And that's the filter saying, I have no idea what you think is in perspective there. It also can go to a yellow line as well. But I'll go back to where we just about had it. If you need to, you can stretch that out and it follows along. Okay, then I'm going to zoom in just here if I can. It doesn't actually pinch for me just here, so I need to zoom in like so. And then pan old school. I've got a clone stamp tool and a selection tool here, a marquee tool. Let's use that one first. So if I go ahead over here, maybe in this region just here, and I'll draw a marquee, you can see that it's working with the perspective. I'm then going to hold down Option or Alt and drag that and line it up with the boards that are there already. And then it will merge that down. Now that one, not the best heel because I took a big chunk too much, I think, really. But generally you work through that. Then you've got the clone stamp tool here. Okay, and just as you would ordinarily, and even with these this sort of wire mesh that's on top, you can still work with this, right? But what I'm going to do is hold down the Alt or Option key. Now I'm purposely going for something between the boards just there, starting over here. Okay, and I'm just going to click in that region. Now you can see that that preview is traveling with me. If I use my right bracket here, I can actually change the size of the brush, and then you can see I can actually paint in. I'm doing this larger than it needs be, okay, just so you can see what's actually happening, but I can actually paint across like so. Now ordinarily, of course, you would never do all of those things in one go, right? You'd have several lighter dabs at doing it and resample fairly frequently so you don't get any obvious patterning here. So I'm bringing in things from different places like so. And the great news is, whoops-a-daisy, that was terrible, that one. The great news is, we're nearly done. The great news is, okay, that with this, if I just hit OK, all right, those edits are on a separate layer. And there you go. That's just a few tips and tricks for you. I know it's a lot to shoehorn in to half an hour, but I hope you've enjoyed that. And thanks very much for watching.